Lee, you were amazing on the panel. Decisive, to the point, contentious. Everything I ask you to be.
Checks in the post.
Thank you very much. And by the way, you are a gifted fund manager as well. So, we were speaking on the panel about different ways of bringing best product to clients. And you've got I think we all agreed, a very interesting way of doing it. Talk about how you package managers within your best ideas funds, and talk about some of the anecdotes you gave us about why you chose this approach and the type of managers you use.
Okay, so I've got a series of funds called Best Ideas Funds. The concept's quite simple. It's identify great managers and ask them to invest in their 10 best stock ideas. It's a simple concept. The problem is it's very hard to find managers that have the skill to actually generate alpha from stock picking. And I think when we had our session, I alluded to the fact that 98% of fund managers have ever met and done due diligence.
Apart from the company I work for.
Naturally, yeah.
Thank you. But keep that on camera, thank you, go.
Yeah. So 98% of all fund managers that I meet are held out as star fund managers. After I've done due diligence on them, I discover that there's no stock picking skill at all. They're just what I call beta jockeys, leverage plays on the market. But there are a few out there that have good talent, and so I'm trying to harness those guys' talents and just getting them to invest in their 10 best stock ideas. And the theory behind it is there was some research many years ago from a group of academics from Harvard and London School of Economics that showed that the bulk of a fund's excess return, or a fund manager's excess return, comes from their top active positions. And it's what you and I know is most stocks in a fund manager's fund are padding filling. They're there for risk control. They're not there to generate alpha. So my funds are all about trying to generate alpha, and that's why I just try and get them to invest in 10 great stock ideas to do that.
So, now the type of managers that you're using. Now, we spoke about distribution trends, and you may remember on the panel we had one person who was saying brand's pretty important because it's easier for the sale process, but that was on a pure distribution standpoint. Obviously you're slightly in the middle, you're a hybrid because you manufacture and distribute as a company, but how is brand relevant at all for you? I'm talking about big corporate brand, I'm not talking about the brand of the individual manager. Is the brand of the company relevant for you?
Not for me. I mean, what I'm interested in is, can the fund manager that I'm going to give money to generate alpha? And the key thing for me about brand, and there's a few connotations with brand. The problem is a lot of the big brand names have big distribution, and if they've got anyone that's talented, that distribution, marketing and sales effort will generate a lot of money that goes into those fund managers' funds, and sooner or later the party stops because the fund manager's got too much assets.
Do you mean there's a correlation between asset size and performance?
I think there is, but I'm not sure the asset management industry want to hear that.
It is fascinating because that is a challenge for all asset managers, is how do you want to feed the machine to some extent, get the growth going, but then you must somehow limit the flows and limit capacity. Do you have that problem? I mean, do you have a size where you think your funds won't work?
I have a size where I think my funds won't work, and then obviously when I reach that size, that's a conversation I'll have with my manager to say, we're at capacity, close the flows. And I think all investment houses should know at what level of assets their fund managers will have a problem to generate alpha.
So you were saying, sorry, about the brand though, so you have these big houses, obviously the machine behind them, but it doesn't necessarily mean the individual's generating any alpha then?
No, there's what I call a halo effect, is just because someone works for a big brand name, people assume that they must be good. And the reality is, for sure, it's a highly educated person, probably an MBA, probably from Harvard, probably a very good speaker, but there's no correlation between that, the brand they work for, and the ability to generate alpha.
Now, how much visibility do you give to the managers who are inside your funds? I mean, I assume the IFAs or the networks or the firms you distribute through want to know who's inside, or is that a little bit of the process, or how important is it to them? So
I'm very open, and my clients want to know who I've entrusted money to within my portfolio. So we tell them who currently is managing parts of the portfolio.
And do you think it could get to a stage where that will be irrelevant? Or is it because you're always packaging other managers, they'll always want to say, well, what's inside?
I think right now they always want to know what's inside.
Right.
I mean, whether that would change, if I'm cynical, I look at a lot of funds that have done well, and I note that great performance leads to asset flows, and I'm pretty sure some of those flows are just on the back of performance without any proper due diligence as to what's inside. So that could happen in the future, if my funds keep performing really well. But for right now, most of the potential clients I meet want to know what's inside, which is good, because they should do proper due diligence like that.
I think it's a challenge from the manufacturing perspective is you see this trend towards funds and mandates or sub-advisory relationships. And you can have this polarization between the very large fund groups who have a brand in the retail market and then the boutiques. And well, then you have actually the worst thing is in the middle, where you can be in the middle. So from your standpoint, how do you look at the market and how it's evolving? Do you think we're going to end up with more similar structures to your own? Is that where the sort of so-called open architecture model migrates to?
I think my view of the world is going forward, people either want cheap exposure to an asset class,
right.
Just beta,
sure.
An ETF or something like that, or they'll want alpha, and I think they'll be willing to pay up for alpha. And sadly for our industry, most people are coursing between those standpoints. They're not the cheapest provider, and they've got products that don't generate alpha, and they need to change.
How is the alpha packaged though? Is it packaged by the distributor? I know you're sort of in between, but is it packaged by the distributor, and so the manufacturer becomes more and more disintermediated, or is it a variation on everything, or do you see a clear trend, or it still ends up being a bit of a mess, which is what it currently is?
I think the industry probably muddles along, but I think you're right. I think distributors are getting more involved in manufacturing, and I think manufacturers, investment houses, a lot of them have talent that don't generate alpha. And I think going forward, if it becomes, right now it's quite opaque to determine whether someone's got alpha or not, unless you do really solid due diligence. So they'll survive for a while, but I think going forward, as the layers of clothes are removed and a lot of people see that a lot of these managers don't generate alpha, the industry's got to shift, and they've got to do something. And obviously you can only have one low-cost provider, which means they've got to do something different to generate alpha. So I think there will be a shift in time, but our industry, from my perspective, moves quite slow on these things.
Yeah, it is a challenging time. And didn't mention the end client. Come on. Where does the end client feature in all this? You're giving them best of breed, best ideas.
So my end clients, they want alpha. So I've got, for example, a European fund.
Mm-hmm.
They could go into a cheap solution, or they could go, well, I want exposure to asset class, but I want alpha as well. So on top of the European equity exposure. So my clients are interested in alpha, but I think if we look at the trend in the UK, the trend is very much for packaged solutions.
Yes.
So you get the IFA speaking to his client, determining his risk profiling, and then he gets put into a risk-orientated solution that gives the outcome the client wants with the level of risk he wants. But I think it depends on different markets, different end clients, as to what the requirement is. So my funds are primarily sold into people that build and package those solutions for their clients.
I got it. Is it fair to say to end up that in some ways you're giving access to managers that they couldn't normally access?
Giving access, some of the managers they wouldn't be able to access.
They wouldn't be, okay.
But what they definitely wouldn't be able to access would be those managers just picking 10 stocks,
That's
which
it.
is
You're
the
right.
thing that's
That
unique.
is unique. You're right, because they don't want to do that.
No.
Because they don't.
So
It limits their,
so they could go out and buy that fund manager's retail fund, which is 50, 60 stocks.
No, I like that. It's a cool idea. You're a genius. I seriously, it's kind of, you're right, because you may get that manager but you won't get the 10 best ideas from that manager ever, because they don't package it that way.
Exactly. And actually, you can't package it that way because of
exactly.
Concentration rules. So
genius.
If all things go right, their 10 best ideas should outperform their retail fund by a large margin, and you end up with a successful product.
Good.
To date, that's happened, so hopefully it will continue.
Lee, nice to talk to you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Richard.